Well, welcome along to the next instalment of our Following a First-Timer Landlord. Our guinea pig is Hilary Reynolds. She's an employee of Vesta, and these videos are powered by Vesta, the buy-to-let marketplace. And Hilary, in the last video, we kind of had an overview of why you decided to get into buy-to-let. And I thought in this video, we would just really look at where you're at now on your journey. We touched briefly on the importance of getting the finance in place first. Now you've actually got now what is known as a decision in principle.
Yes.
And that means that you've got an agreement from a lender to lend you a certain amount of money. Did that bring a lot of clarity to your direction and where you could invest?
Yes, I think I guess I'd always had this figure in my mind, and it gave me that, yes, you know, you would be approved as a first-time buyer and as a first-time landlord. It also gave me clarity of how much and where my budget is. It also then said, well, actually, if I keep saving for a while, you know, is there scope to go up in a particular property? So it just set those parameters.
Yes.
For where I could look and the different areas that were open to me. And also it clarified the different sequencing of events, because part of that thing I was like, what tax structure am I going to do it in, whether it's as a sole trader or a limited company, and all of these things are really important as a part of this decision, I found out, because you need to do things in certain sequencing events.
You're absolutely right.
I want to do it as a limited company, I need to set up that company before I can speak to the mortgage and a bank account and a tax advisor and all that kind of stuff.
That is absolutely brilliant that you've said that, touched on the tax, because it is so important to set up your property business in the most efficient tax structure. Hilary's just looking at that at the moment, and if you are thinking of starting out as a landlord, you do need to be aware of what is known as Section 24, which was introduced in 2015 by George Osborne, the then Chancellor of the Exchequer. I'm sure you're aware of this, Hilary, that he has removed mortgage interest relief in increments from landlords, and that's had a huge impact on how they structure their property holdings. Hilary just mentioned that you've got the option to invest as a sole trader or as a limited company. They each have separate mortgage products and a different sequence of events of applying, as you said. So tax, very much on your agenda.
Massively.
You're just investigating that now, and you'll no doubt speak to a tax advisor and go through all of it with them.
Yes, that's kind of the next goal for me. Now that I kind of know my budget, what's the right tax structure, I've kind of built a bit of a spreadsheet to try and work out what's the right financials for me. So once I speak to them, I'll be able to really build out that business case and understand how the business is going to operate and the various different types of cash flow.
Yeah.
And in parallel, now that I've kind of got that number, I'm going to start looking at what areas and the types of properties that might be available to me.
Well, then it gets exciting, doesn't it? Because it starts to become a lot more real when you start actually going onto the portals and looking at different properties. And how did you, or have you identified the area that you want to invest in?
Not yet. I've kind of shortlisted to, the different places up north, because it's more affordable for me with my budget. I also would like somewhere that has a good tenant demand, where there's good youth, good employment. There's been a lot of infrastructure investment up north and in the West Midlands and Yorkshire and all that kind of strip. So I think that's the kind of centre of where I'll focus. But in terms of digging down into different towns, that's next on the agenda.
Well, that's really where it starts to get interesting, and where you'll really need to tap into local knowledge. So I guess one of the things that you can do is start speaking to local estate agents, and they'll be able to tell you, the type of properties that are in demand, the type of tenants in the area. One thing you do need to be mindful of, every landlord says, oh, I want to rent to professional tenants or families. Yes, they're great, but clearly in certain areas of the UK, there's a lot of tenants in receipt of housing benefit and universal credit, and they're probably not a great strategy for a first-timer landlord. Would you agree with that?
I think for me, I'm looking for the most straightforward, as
Yes.
it's my first experience. Foray, that's right. I want to do it as a professional business. The ultimate ambition is to probably grow a few properties, but obviously this is my first one. So I want to keep it as uncomplicated and straightforward as possible. And not just for that reason, but I'm here in London. So it will be more hands-off for me, and it will be further afield and in an area I don't know and I'm not from. So I'm looking for, you know, a partner with managing that as well.
Yes, indeed. So you'll need to understand how to find a good letting agent, how to vet them, and we can talk about that in another video actually. But I think it's worth noting, you know, being an employee of Vesta, Vesta is the marketplace for tenanted properties. One very low risk way to get started is indeed to buy a tenanted property, because you know that you've got tenant demand from day one, you've got income from day one, you can check the payment history of the tenant, you can see how they're living in the property, how they're keeping it. So no doubt tenanted properties are on your radar.
Absolutely. That's that market comes ready made for me. So I guess for me it's an ideal package.
Yeah, and I like it on the Vesta platform that you can actually see the yields, because yield is a really important metric, and I know that you've created some spreadsheets where you're plugging in all your numbers and you can literally see how each potential deal is going to stack up. And again, that's so important, because the great thing about numbers is they'll never lie to you. They will always tell you the truth. So it's really, really great that you've got these spreadsheets, and you're starting to populate them now, aren't you?
Yeah, taking various different numbers, looking at different percentages, and kind of looking at also the cost structure, so how I'm going to run it. And just getting aware of all the things I'm going to need to think about and become skilled, whereas I'm not going to be hands-on, but equally I don't want it to blow over, because it's my business at the end of the day.
I'm so glad you said that, because very important thing to understand is that the buck always stops with the landlord. Even if you have a fully managed service, nobody can divest a landlord of their responsibilities. The buck stops with you, and with civil penalties of up to £30,000 for non-compliance, it just shows how important it is to wear a business hat and treat it as a business. And you're very, very determined to treat it as such, aren't you?
Yes, 100%.
Well, that's absolutely brilliant. So there we go. That's the next instalment of Hilary's journey, and do stay tuned, because we're going to be following her more and moving on now to looking at actual properties. And where will Hilary invest? Well, you'll have to tune into the next video to find out.